The smartest thing we can do is act big. Today, Treasury Secretary candidate Janet Yellen spoke to the Senate Finance Committee at the endorsement session. She argued in her statements that the great financial incentive was justified just to support the economy while the epidemic was still going on. She stressed the need to address income inequality and pledged to support the new Biden administration's climate change policies. In other words, it plans to support large amounts of government spending to boost the economy. She admitted that debt was a potential problem, but he added, right now, with interest rates at historically low levels, the smartest thing we can do is act big. In the long run, I believe the benefits will outweigh the costs, especially if we care about helping people who have struggled for a long time. Let's say this is a wishful thought. Fiscal policy will not work. We cannot escape the debt trap. As I explained earlier, fiscal policy is not encouraging because the US debt GDP ratio is currently over 130% and is growing rapidly. Extensive research shows that at debt to GDP ratios above 90%, the new debt multiplier is less than 1. This means we are in debt trap, in addition to the liquidity trap caused by Yellen's previous agency, the Fed. But Janet Yellen does not have a real understanding of money and the monetary economy. His tenure at Fed proves this. The Fed and Congress may try to stimulate the economy, but they will fail. We are probably moving towards another crisis. I will not predict when exactly it will happen, but you can see the pieces fit. Yellen's candidacy paves the way for a catastrophic policy that could lead to a monstrous crisis down the road. Modern money theory. Ghost of MMT. Appointing former Fed Chairman Janet Yellen as the new Treasury Secretary is a clear sign of what MMT's management plans to do. MMT calls on the Fed and Treasury to merge into a single spend monetization entity. The government can spend as much as it wants and run the deficit as high as it wants, because the Fed can cash any Treasury debt by issuing money and keeping the debt on its balance sheet until maturity, while it can be transferred to a new one, debt. This theory says that the US can directly stimulate the economy and pay for a ton of new social spending. Unlike the quantitative expansion that often enriched Wall Street, MMT will help real Americans. Proponents argue that MMT can fund Medicare for all, free education, free childcare, guaranteed basic income, and aggressive climate action. They say the Fed printed $4 trillion between 2008 and 2014 to save banks and help keep Wall Street's big bonuses. There was no inflation, so why not print $10 trillion or more to try out these new programs? So what better way to achieve this merger than by appointing the former Fed chief as the new Treasury chief? With a former Fed chief as the new Treasury chief, I can say mission completed. As a result, MMT advocates say the US can spend as much as it wants, borrow money to cover deficits, and the Fed can cash the debt by printing money. Theory is not a theory because it lacks evidence, and there is nothing modern in it because it has existed for over 100 years. Yet, there is all the anger these days in Washington, D.C. MMT's three main principles. MMT has three basic principles. The first is to treat the Treasury and the Fed as a single asset with a single balance sheet. Legally, the two institutions are separate, but MMT insists that the government can function as one. This means combining Treasury and Fed operations into one engine for spending, borrowing, and printing. The second idea is that citizens must accept dollars, whether they like it or not, because you need dollars to pay taxes. And if you do not pay taxes, you will go to jail. The dollar, in Mao Zedong's words, is supported by the barrel of gun. The third idea is that there is no practical limit to how much the US can lend. The US debt to GDP ratio is about 130% today. up 106% last year. But MMT cheerleaders point to Japan's over 250% as proof that the US can borrow much more. These ideas are all very flawed. Japan is not a good test case because the Japanese are borrowing their own, the US trust foreign investors, and the Japanese economy has barely been growing for 30 years. Try this in the United States. And if inflation seems to pose a threat, the government taxes any excess money in the economy. Simple, but flawed. As I explained earlier, MMT is a very flawed theory. It presupposes a mechanical approach to money and inflation that does not exist in the real world. Inflation is a psychological phenomenon based on exceptions. You can combine the Fed and the Treasury operationally, but when you are making money from all the new debt in the markets, trust erodes, rates rise, and this pyramid scheme collapses. And once trust is lost, citizens can turn to land, gold, silver, and natural resources and other valuable assets as dollar alternatives. You don't owe taxes for unrealized earnings, so the MMT tax police will have nothing to keep them busy. MMT is a disaster, and the construction may take several years to hit the game. It may result in hyperinflation and destruction of the dollar as a viable currency. If you are investing in highly productive assets, it's okay to borrow money. However, if you spend to support a stagnant economy with charity, you dig a deeper debt hole for yourself. Multi-trillion-dollar open spending plans will soon emerge from the new Congress. The Treasury will spend money, the Fed will buy Treasury debt with newly minted money. Eventually, you end up with default, inflation, higher interest rates, higher taxes, or all the above. The USA will go bankrupt. Not a very rosy scenario where the MMT crowd will make you believe. It may still be coming, and an uninformed Janet Yellen will direct the entire operation. Got gold? Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is advised to consult an expert before making this decision.